What's happening, everybody? Justin, Bridgewater's finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter, fueled as always by the incredible folks at NerdTees and kept warmer than I should be in August by my East Coast lifestyle hoodie. Welcome to week 11 of my weekly CFL football pick show for the 2019 CFL season. And look, I'm not sponsored by East Coast Lifestyle, but considering that this week is the Touchdown Atlantic football game, I'm feeling very Atlantic Canadian. And given that it is Touchdown Atlantic week, I wanted to do something a little extra special in the episode this week, and that is, I got another special guest. We had Smitty a few weeks ago. He did a great job. I've brought in another Twitter capper friend of mine, Mr. TK, and he is going to be in here talking about the Hamilton BC Lions matchup. You're going to want to stay tuned for that one. Speaking of rocking, I've now rocked it in back-to-back weeks. I should rename my channel to like King of Segways or something like that. Another 8-4 week. It's our second straight 8-4 week after what was, the first bad week that I had all season. 3-1 straight up and a sparkling 4-0 against the spread with the picks last week. If I'd have done anything in the totals, it would have been a truly spectacular week. But as it stands, it's back-to-back consistent good weeks. 8-4 total, 71-46 across all of my CFL picks this season. That's just up over that 60% total, which we like. That's where we like to be. 69% straight up, and now 64% against the spread. Standings in the East Division remain essentially unchanged. You've still got Hamilton way out front there by what is essentially a 3 full game lead over the Montreal Alouettes. Montreal did pull their record to an even 4-4 with that incredible football game last week, which we will talk about. In the West, the Bombers have a 1-game lead over the Edmonton Eskimos. Bombers at 7-2, Eskimos at 6-3. You did have Saskatchewan leapfrogging Calgary, which is funny because Saskatchewan didn't play last week, but they leapfrogged Calgary in the standings based on Calgary's loss against Montreal. And right now, you would have the Calgary Stampeders in a crossover position. In the official Atlantic Schooners CFL Fantasy Football League, kind of took it on the chin last week. Wasn't exactly my most sterling fantasy football week. I now sit in 21st place out of 68 people in that pool. Only had 68.5 points back in week 10. Again, not exactly the best performance I've had all year. 828.9 points overall, again, has me in that 21st position. My week 10 MVP, however, Braylon Addison for the Hamilton Tiger Cats. He had 8 catches for 100 yards receiving, added 16 yards on 5 carries on the ground. He brought me in 19.6 points. And hoping for better performances across the board, my week 11 CFL fantasy football lineup is now right in front of your eyes. We're sticking with Braylon Addison, which we did last week, and we're also going to add in Luke Tasker, who had a pretty decent game last week, and we'll certainly be looking to build on that this week. And we're going real heavy on Hamilton here. Cameron Marshall in the run game had himself a good game last week, and just what I would think was his second game of the season. Saving a little money with Christian Jones. He's been very good in the return game so far this season. Leaning on William Powell to have a big game for Saskatchewan against Ottawa. That's a game in Saskatchewan. And we're going to go with the Montreal Alouettes defense, simply because I don't think that's going to be the highest scoring game that you've seen all season. And at the price tag you got for Montreal's defense, it was too much of a value play for me to overlook. That is the Week 11 CFL Fantasy Football lineup. Our schedule of games in Week 11 looks like this. You got the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, now minus Matt Nichols, traveling to Edmonton to take on the Eskimos, basically a battle for first place in the West Division. You got Ottawa traveling to Saskatchewan to take on the Riders. Hamilton is in BC to take on the Lions, and the Montreal Alouettes travel to Toronto to take on the Argos. You have Calgary off this week. Let's kick things off in Edmonton, that battle of the Blue Bombers versus the Eskimos for best in the West. Bombers come into this game on the road at 7-2, winners of 2 consecutive games, doubling up the BC Lions at home in Winnipeg last week, 32-16, and just the latest quarterback injury in the CFL. However, this one may be the most significant one considering how late we are now into the season. Matt Nichols, he goes down with an arm injury. I think it was the shoulder. I could be wrong about that, but he's got an arm injury. He moves to the 6-game injured list, and at this point in the season, you're talking about now being 15 games into the season before you're going to get your QB1 back. Blue Bombers absolutely pounded the ball on the ground in that football game. 28 carries for $123 and a rushing touchdown as a team. Now that rushing touchdown did not come from Andrew Harris. However, Andrew Harris had himself a fairly significant football game. The defense also generating 6 turnovers off of the BC Lions and absolutely controlled the line of scrimmage in that game. What else is new against BC? Racking up lucky 7 sacks against Mike Riley and the Lions offensive line. Andrew Harris, as I mentioned, setting a new all-time record for yards from scrimmage from a Canadian-born player. He passes Ben Cahoon, who is a legend in this league. Andrew Harris now all alone on top in terms of yards from scrimmage, and that's a huge accomplishment for a running back that only seems to be getting better as he gets older. The Edmonton Eskimos enter this football game also winners of 2 straight games, sitting at 6-3. They've also won 3 out of their last 4, and it's been the defense, man. The defense has really ratcheted things up over the last 4 games, only giving up about an average of 16 points a game. They're playing very well. Eskimos coming off a 41-26 victory in Toronto last week, a game that was absolutely dictated, however, at the quarterback position. Trevor Harris had flurry in that football game, but he also had finish. I've criticized him before for not having that. 420 yards passing and 5 total touchdowns for Trevor Harris in that game, 2 of them coming on the ground. 2 Eskimos wide receivers topping the century mark in receiving yards in that game. Greg Ellingson, no surprise there. 10 catches for $170 and 2 of Trevor Harris's 3 passing touchdowns. You also had Tavares Daniels, only caught 5 balls, but turned that into 155 yards receiving. Ricky Collins, also of note, 8 catches in that game for 71 yards and a score. Harris can really distribute the ball. Also have to shout out Christian Jones, who I kind of mentioned a little bit earlier when I was going over my fantasy lineup. Since the move over to Edmonton, he's really adjusted to what the Eskimos are asking him to do. 2 games since the trade from Saskatchewan, he's got 19 kick or punt returns in those 2 games. He's turned him into 303 return yards. He's doing a heck of a job in that game. As a comparison, in Saskatchewan, in the 3 games I think he played in Saskatchewan, he had 21 returns, only had 234 return yards. So in fewer returns, got quite a few more yards. Despite leading the West Division, the Blue Bombers are only a 500 football team away from their own building. They're only 2-2 on the season. They just lost their QB1. I'm a big Chris Streveler fan. I love Streveler. I hate the situation. You know, I just don't think I can go against the Eskimos right now, especially considering Edmonton has not lost a game at home so far this season, and it's not unheard of for elite teams in the West or an elite team in the West to go unbeaten at home. I like Edmonton in this football game. It's a tight one. It's going to be a close game. Defense will be the order of the day, but I like the Eskimos here. Let's take Edmonton at home to hang a loss, just the 3rd loss of the season, on the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. On the line, however, Edmonton favored by 6.5 points at home, and for 2 elite defenses, I just think that's way too many points. I'm hedging my bets here. I'm going to go Winnipeg plus 6.5. The possibility exists that they win this game outright. Total in the game is set at 46.5 points. It's actually a pretty good total, but I only capped this around a 43, 44, something like that. So it's under enough, and the defenses are good enough that I think I got to stay under on it. So we're going to go under 46.5 points in Edmonton, Winnipeg. Let's go to Saskatchewan now, where the Riders, coming off of their bye week, will welcome in the lowly Ottawa REDBLACKS. I shouldn't say lowly, but REDBLACKS are only 3-6. They've lost 2 straight games, and they've lost 3 of their last 4. Not exactly playing great football right now. Lost a 21-7 decision at home against Hamilton last week. And I mean, is this a team that is snake bitten? Are they just a little bit unlucky? Are they, like I said about them last year, a bad football team masquerading as like an okay football team. I'm at the point with the Red Blacks where I don't exactly know what they are. That loss last week was certainly not for lack of opportunity. Hamilton put the ball on the ground a few times. Evans threw 2 interceptions. Ottawa had opportunities to put points on the board. The failure to do so really came down, in my opinion, to Dominique Davis. And I don't think enough people are talking about how mediocre he's actually been this year. Because I think when you put him up against their other option at quarterback, I think that just makes people be like, oh man, I can't wait for Dominique Davis to play. Since week 2, he had that week 2 game where he threw 3 touchdowns against Saskatchewan, and everybody thought, okay, this kid's the real deal. Since that game, and I realize he missed a little time with injury, but since that game, he's throwing under 59% on his completions. He's got 2 touchdowns and 7 interceptions. That's since week 2, at least in terms of passing. I mean, he's got 5 rushing touchdowns. He's done good things with his legs. But in terms of being a passing quarterback, he's not been very good. Of note, Red Blacks place kicker Lewis Ward's consecutive field goal made streak comes to an end in that game last week at 69 consecutive field goals. He shattered the all-time record. It was Adam Vinatieri's record for all of pro football. Shattered his record. Vinatieri's record was 44. So you're talking about 25 more made kicks in a row than the second place guy. Lewis Ward is something special. If you take away every kick that Lewis Ward has made during this streak that was 20 yards or fewer, he still holds the record. The Saskatchewan Roughriders are unquestionably the hottest team in the CFL right now. They're only 5-3, but they're winners of 4 consecutive football games, and in those games, they're outscoring opponents by basically 2 full possessions. They beat Montreal back in week 9 by a touchdown, 17-10. They didn't exactly look like the hottest team in the CFL in that game, but they did what Calgary did, and they won a little ugly. Not a ton of offense to be found for the Roughriders in that game, just 231 total yards. When the game was called, of course, that was a game that was called due to lightning and rain, due to the weather. So it did get called short. They did generate, however, 2 fumble return touchdowns on defense, one to Charleston Hughes and the other, I can't remember who the other one was, but 2 fumble return touchdowns was basically all the offense that they needed. I do want to see Saskatchewan clean up the penalties a little bit. They took 8 penalties for 73 penalty yards in less than 3 full quarters. So they were on pace for probably a 10 to 100 game. Especially as the football games get bigger, Saskatchewan's going to want to clean something like that up if they really want to be able to compete. And as it looks right now, Saski's still more than capable of competing, not only for the division, but for a Grey Cup. They got to get better at that, though. Assuming Saskatchewan can limit their own mistakes, because once again, that's what kept Ottawa in that game against Hamilton last week. It could have been a blowout had Hamilton not made all those mental errors. So assuming Saskatchewan keeps those mental errors to a minimum, I don't see a path where Ottawa beats Saskatchewan based on their own merits. I feel like Saski's got to make a mistake that Ottawa capitalizes on, comes up from underneath, and wins. We're going to assume that those mental mistakes don't happen in this football game. I'm going to be taking the Saskatchewan Roughriders at home to hang a loss on Ottawa. However, the Riders are favored by 10 points against the spread at home in this game, and I just think that's too many. I think the game's going to be a little lower scoring, and I just think double-digit points, just a little bit too many. I realize Saski's more than capable of running the ball, putting up offensive yardage, and putting up points. Worth pointing out, the Red Blacks are 3-1 against the spread on the road this season, and 2-1 on the road against the spread as an underdog of 7 points or more, which is what they are in this football game. Total in the game set at 48.5 points. I think this is a little bit of a coin flip total. I think you could go either way on this one. I personally capped it around 45, 46 points, somewhere in that area. So it's enough underneath that I'm comfortable hedging my bets, taking the under 48.5 points in Ottawa Saski. Before we get to TK to talk a little bit about Hamilton and BC, I'm going to take the opportunity, as I always do, to pump the tires of my great friends at NerdTees, nerdtees.ca. Use that promo code BWFinest. That's going to save you 15% at checkout. Free shipping in Canada on any order over $75. Or if you're in the US, 2 clicks of a button, everything is in US dollars for you. Today's blend is Kiwilicious, another one that's great hot or great cold, smells incredible, tastes incredible. Nerdteas.ca. Use my promo code, save some money, get your free shipping, find yourself something to love, or find someone you love something to love. You can do it at nerdteas.ca. Now, here we go. Hamilton at BC. You've heard me talk a bunch. It's time for me to throw it over to my dude TK, who's going to talk a little bit about this football game.
Thanks, Justin, for the opportunity. I really appreciate a chance to be on the show. The game I'm looking at this week is the Hamilton Tiger Cats traveling to BC to take on the BC Lions. Hamilton was winners last week over Ottawa 21-7, while BC takes another loss against Winnipeg 32-16. Looking to the previous matchup between these two teams a few weeks ago, BC was in control of that game until the fourth quarter, and then the wheels came off. Hamilton scores 16 points in the fourth quarter and scores on a late touchdown pass to Brandon Banks to pull off the win. Ouch. That sucks. There is no question to me that BC is one of the worst football teams in the league this season. BC is second to last in the league for home team scoring defense and dead last in home team rushing defense. On offense, it doesn't get any better. Dead last in home team passing and rushing. While Hamilton is better overall, they are second to last in road team rushing defense. On offense, they're pretty good. They are first in the league for road team scoring offense and passing. BC is second in the league for home team passing defense. And looking at the previous matchup history between these two teams, Hamilton is 1-4 in their last 5 meetings at BC, both against the spread and winning outright. The over has hit 4 out of the last 5 times. In the last 10 matchups, where Hamilton was favored 4 times, they lost all 4 times, both outright and against the spread, while the over hit all 4 times. If BC can find a way to protect their quarterback, Mike Riley, which has been their biggest problem all season, I think they have a shot at winning this game. Added with Hamilton's rough rushing defense on the road, I'm willing to take a shot on BC and go BC against the spread at 3.5. BC to win the game outright. And with the total sitting at 47, I'm taking a shot at the over on that one. Once again, Justin, I appreciate the time to be on the show.
TK, my dude, thank you so much for your contribution to the show this week. It means a lot to me to get the guys that I want to get a little bit more exposure to. It means a lot for me to get these guys on the show. You can follow Mr. TK on Twitter at the Twitter address below, _Mr_TK_. He's a great capper. He's a great follow on Twitter. Toss him a follow. Do it for me. Just a couple things to add here. Hamilton's won 3 of their last 4 games. Not exactly playing incredible football, but they're still picking up the wins. Of note, in that game last week at Ottawa, Brandon Banks got shut down for basically the first time all season that he's actually played. Had a very mediocre game. I think only caught 2 of 6 passes. And only naturally, Braylon Addison and Luke Tasker, who combined in that game for 14 catches for $183 through the air. They were right there to pick up the slack. Ticats also finally committed to a run game in that game last week. 27 carries, 27 carries for 133 yards rushing on the ground and a rushing touchdown as a team for the Ticats. Their previous high in a game since the Sean Thomas Erlington injury was 95. So they really committed to the run game here. I imagine we're going to see a lot more of that this coming week. On the Lions side, they've now lost 5 consecutive games. Another day, another beating for Mike Riley. He takes 7 sacks, and you got to wonder whose bags he's shitting in on his offensive line that they just don't care about protecting their golden goose. Riley's taken 19 sacks in his last 4 football games. And remember, that stat doesn't count hits. That just counts the number of times he has the football and takes a quarterback sack. It doesn't count the number of times that he releases the football and gets hit, or just general hits that he's taking in the run of a football game. It doesn't count those. That's strictly sacks. and he's taken 19 in 4 games. And I've been talking about it all season. The BC Lions, to me, are a team with players of significance on both sides of the football, on offense and on defense. They got some playmakers on both sides, but it's a bad football team as a whole. And until they can put it all together as a whole, it's tough to get behind them. I personally, and I know you just saw what TK took, I personally can't justify backing a team that over the last 4 games are giving up 38 points a game. I realized the competition there was at a certain level, and they can't even protect their own quarterback. So I just personally can't get behind backing a team like that. Now, if they prove me wrong, fantastic, and maybe I have to reevaluate the way I'm thinking about them. But as of right now, I can't back them. I have to go with Hamilton. Going to take the Ticats here on the road in BC to beat the BC Lions, and we're going to hammer the Hamilton Tiger Cats against the spread for the second week in a row. We're hammering hammer because Hamilton is only a 3.5 point favorite on the road here. This feels like this line with Edmonton should be swapped. I felt like the Edmonton line should have been a lot closer, and this line I don't think should be this close. So that I feel like should have been swapped, but we're going to hammer the Ticats minus 3.5 against the spread. Total in the game set at 47.5, and I'm with my boy TK on that one. I'm going to skew on the over here. The trends are going that way. I've actually got this game capped around a mid-50, so that's a pretty darn comfortable over. I'm curious about why this total is the way that it is. I think it goes over. And the last game we're going to look at is, funny enough, the game that I actually thought TK was going to talk about before he actually sent me the contribution, which is the Montreal Alouettes against the Toronto Argos. This is the Touchdown Atlantic game that is being played in Moncton, New Brunswick, a game I wish I could be at. I just couldn't quite get enough time off of work to do it. Plus, I got my Dynasty draft this weekend. It's important stuff. The Montreal Alouettes winning that football game last week, an incredible football game in Calgary against the Stampeders. They win that game 40-34 in overtime, and that game was the Vernon Adams show at quarterback. And here's how nuts this game was for Vernon Adams after halftime. We're talking about just the second half and overtime. This is the line on Vernon Adams. 23 of 34. 269 yards passing, 2 touchdown passes, no picks, added 6 carries, 31 yards, 2 rushing touchdowns, and 2 two-point conversions in regulation time to get this game to overtime. Vernon Adams, between a pass touchdown, a rush touchdown, or a 2-point convert, put 28 points on the board. Jeremiah Johnson, 13 carries, $107 on the ground. He did very well in William Stanback's absence. Davier Posey and Eugene Lewis, they both go over 100 yards receiving. A lot of offensive bright spots for Montreal in that football game. And just what a signature win on the road against an elite team. Argos losing coming off of their bye and off of their first win of the season. They've lost 3 of their last 4 games, and they're giving up 30 points a game. It's not good. Now, the fact that the Argos put up points in all 4 quarters, that is an enthusiastic and encouraging sign if you're an Argos fan. It was just simply a matter of too much versus not enough in this game. McLeod Bethel-Thompson plays a clean game, not a spectacular game, but a clean game. 73% passing, 200 yards passing, threw 2 touchdowns, didn't throw a pick, added 38 yards on 5 carries on the ground. It's a clean game, and that's a good sign for the Argos. You do have to start asking the question, how many more starts does MBT get before Zach Collaros is healthy and ready to play again? And as per usual for the 1-7 Argos this season, it was the defense that dropped the ball in a 2-possession, winnable football game. They gave up 509 total yards of offense, did the Argos defense. They took 3 of the Argos 5 penalties in the game. Now, the Argos only had 5 penalties, which is a good thing, but 3 of them were taken by the defense, and they did not generate a turnover. And look, it's not exactly like generating turnovers are easy, but in a game like that, all you need is 1. This game terrifies me. It terrifies me because it checks all the boxes for an upset. You have Montreal with a big signature win on the road last week. They're still technically on the road this week because the game's in Moncton. Back-to-back road games trying to win, check mark, upset. You're talking about a team in Montreal that absolutely emptied the tank to win their game last week. What do they still have on offense this week? There's a check mark. You got the Argos, who at this point, I don't necessarily think people are looking at them like a team that's going to win a lot of football games down the stretch, but they're doing a lot of good things that aren't necessarily getting noticed. There's another check mark. If I felt that the upset was coming, I'd take it. I feel like Vernon Adams showed us in that game last week that he might be the first Alouettes quarterback since Calvillo to really show that refuse to lose. And there are some players that just have that refuse to lose. Like they see that the game's getting away from them and they say, no, hell with that. I'm taking the game on my back and I'm doing everything I possibly can for us to win this football game. He's made me a believer. I'm taking the Owls. I'm going to take Montreal to beat Toronto, technically at home, but Toronto is the home team here. But it's Touchdown Atlantic. It's a road game for both teams and a home game for both teams. Why don't we call it that? We're going to take Montreal to win Touchdown Atlantic. On the line, Montreal's a 6-point favorite in this football game. This is a flat-out hedge. Flat-out hedging my bets. I'm going to go with Toronto, even though the Argos are giving up 30 points a game on defense in their last 4. The potential for the upset is there, so if I don't get the game straight up, I'd like to at least get a piece of it, so we're going to hedge our bets and go Toronto +6 against the spread. Total in the game set at 55 points. I think this stays under. I've got this at like 49, 50, 51, something like that. There you go, folks. Those are your Week 11 picks in the CFL. Bit of a disjointed episode this week, and I apologize for that. Running around a lot this week. We'll try to do better next week, but here are the picks for you one more time. We've got Edmonton at home to beat the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. I am hedging my bets there, taking Winnipeg +6.5 against the spread in a game that stays under the 46.5 point total. I've got the Saskatchewan Roughriders at home beating the Ottawa REDBLACKS, but we're hedging our bets there as well, going Ottawa +10 against the spread, just too many points there, in a game that also stays under the 48.5 point total. We got the Hamilton Tiger Cats on the road in BC to beat the Lions. We're hammering Hamilton -3.5 against the spread in the only game I have going over this week, over 47.5 points. And in Touchdown Atlantic, I got the Montreal Alouettes defeating the Toronto Argonauts, hedging our bets there as well, going Toronto +6 against the spread in a game that stays under 55 points. So I'd like to take the time to say, TK, thank you so much for contributing to the episode this week. You did excellent, my dude. It was, again, I really love doing this. I love getting these guys, these cappers from Twitter who are really into the league and like really good personalities. I like getting these guys to contribute to these episodes. I hope to have at least a couple more. And I'd just like to take the opportunity to talk for another second about Touchdown Atlantic. I wish I could be there. Unfortunately, I can't. Touchdown Atlantic needs to be successful. So if you're at all invested in the CFL, or certainly in the CFL on the East Coast, do everything you can to be at this football game. Show the rest of the country, show everybody west of the New Brunswick border that the East Coast is CFL and CFL is the East Coast. Show them that we deserve this. Show them that the league needs this. Show them they're not going to convince themselves. You need to convince them. As a fan base, you need to be loud. You need to be active. I realize neither one of these teams are going to be your team. That doesn't matter. You need to show them that the East Coast needs football. Do it for me. That's it for me. Justin, Bridgewater's Finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter, fueled as always by the incredible folks at NerdTees. Enjoy the games this week. Enjoy Touchdown Atlantic. We will see you again for Week 12.